Hello and welcome to the first edition of Let Me Tableau This For You, a sweet little series that I made up for my blog, which kind of looks at how some of the data analysis workflows that I found on the internet on a number of blogs could be also done in Tableau. Now, as I also wrote in the accompanying blog post, this is not to discredit the authors or to show that Tableau is the better tool to do those analyses. It's just to show that the same analysis can also be done in the same way and maybe a little bit easier in Tableau as well. So by easier, I mostly mean without having to code anything. For the first edition of this series, I chose a blog series which I found on the blog of stolzmaniac.com, which is actually great because it talks about something I also care a lot about. Like after my PhD thesis about terrorism, I looked a lot into spatial crime analysis. So this blog or this analysis actually looks into data analysis related to crime in Denver, Colorado. And as you can see here on the blog post, the city of Denver actually publishes their crime data publicly on the internet. So that's great. And that's actually a great resource of data. So yeah, that was an obvious choice for me to also look into this. You can see here we can download the whole CSV file, or we could also download some shape files, which, as I understand from the series of blogs that have been published already on this, is also something the original author is planning to do in the future. So we might have a look into that as well. But for now, let's just stick to the CSV file so we can download that here from the website, which I have already done. So what we can do is we can just directly go into Tableau and load the text file, the CSV file with all the crimes, and there we go. So the reason why I show this is that if you read the original blog post, the first, I don't know, few paragraphs are actually about preparing the analysis. So you can see, as is usual in R, you have to load the packages that you need, you have to load the data, you have to make sure that everything is in the right format, and then there is a lot of data munging, specifically about the date data. So what I want to show here is that all of this is actually not necessary in Tableau, because Tableau, when you load the data, actually analyzes the structure of the data. And in this case, for example, which is the first occurrence date, which is the one that the original author also uses for their timestamp of each crime, this actually has been recognized by Tableau already as a date time. So there's nothing for us to do. Tableau did all the work for us. That's very neat. So we can go directly to the analysis pane. And I'm going to keep the original blog post on the right-hand side and Tableau on the left-hand side, just so that we can compare what's going on. So the very first thing the author did here is something I also always do when I get a new data set, just some basic plotting and some basic descriptive analytics. So in terms of how many records do we have? And we can easily replicate the the bar chart you can see here on the right-hand side, which is just the number of incidents per year, just like that in Tableau. And Tableau decides to, by default, draw a timeline, which I think is the better visualization for that actually. But if you want to, you can also put this as a bar chart. That's not an issue. Now, the next thing the author does is to add some color, as they call it, and just by showing the different months. And this is also very easy to be done in Tableau. We can just drag the first occurrence date again to color. And what I'm doing here is actually dragging with my right mouse key, which opens this dialog. So I can say, okay, please put the month level on the color. And this is what happens, and it's kind of exactly what the blog post does, except you might see in R, the script gave back only the number of the month. Tableau, since we actually understand dates as dates, Tableau passes them automatically into the proper date names, so it's a bit easier to understand for people. Now, there's two things maybe to mention about this. The first thing is, as the blog author mentions in their blog, the data is being reported on a monthly level. And since the very first blog post of the series was in November, I think, the data was only up until October. So what they decided to do was to look at what is the maximum month for the last year, and to throw away all the data from the month that do not appear in all the years. Now, this is probably a conscious decision, which results in the figure that we can see down here that for all of the years we only have data up until October. As you can see in my case, since it's already December, there is a little bit of data reported in December here, but we also have the data for the full of November and October. And I personally don't really like the idea of throwing away good data like all those Novembers and Decembers in the previous years. So what we can do later on, if we want to, is to throw away maybe December 2016. Now, obviously, this will result in a slightly different figures in the end, but the main trends should be the same. Now, the other thing that I kind of don't like about this graph is that this is not very informative. There's a lot of data being shown on the graph, but not a lot of information. It's really hard to compare stuff. So I'd like to go back to the line chart that Tableau suggested in the very beginning. And even though this looks a bit messed up with a spaghetti graph, we can see a few things. The first thing is what I mentioned already, December 2016 is kind of underreported so far because we're still in the middle of the month. But what I can do in Tableau very easily is just exclude this one data point. And you can see the pink curve for 2016 actually ends now over here. The other thing I'd like to do or to show you is that what we can see is that there is a trend that crime rose over the years, right? So in all the months, there is a definite trend up over all the years. And we can see that February has always been the month with the least crime, which might probably be related to the fact that it's also the shortest month in all the years. But that's not really part of the analysis, so let's not go into details here. The next thing the author did was to stack bars and colors to view individual months. That's what we already saw. No, but then he also split it up into the crime, which is actual crime, and also traffic incidents. So in the data, there is a variable which is called is crime. So that's kind of a, well, it could be a Boolean, but it's actually coded as a number. So 0 means it's a traffic incident, and crime means it's actually a crime. Now, Tableau by default, since it's a number, thinks that this is a measure, but actually in this case, we need to regard it as a dimension because we want to split our data by that. But as you know, this is very easy. We can drag it up here and just visualize the data like this. So let me duplicate the sheet so we don't destroy what we have done yet. And we can now just use our isCrime on the color and show the time or the temporal change in crime and traffic incidents over the years. And we can see that this spike that we saw in the overall data is mostly related to an increase in crime, right? So that's interesting. Let's also look at the bar chart. So we have the same visualization as the author had, and we can see this is encoded as a number down here. Is crime is either 0 or 1. Now, since the variable is called is crime, we can actually recode this one or edit the alias to say if it is 0, it's actually a traffic incident, and if it is 1, it's actually a crime, right? So now the plot is just a bit more appealing, and in the plot on the original blog, the crime was on top. So let's format it like this, and that should now be the same graph as we see in the chart. So that was actually the end of the very first blog post. So this, as you can see, even with me talking and explaining everything, took us not more than a few minutes. But then the author went even deeper and looked into a few more of the crime-related incidents. So as he said, let's dive in. So first, the very first thing they did was to look only at the crime. So that's very easy. We can just select crime and say keep only, and that's it, instead of writing a lot of code to filter it out and so on and create a bar chart. So that's exactly the chart that we can see, and we can also show the labels. And as I mentioned earlier, we are getting slightly different numbers because we did not filter out November and December. Also, I decided to keep 2016 in here, so the numbers are a bit different, but the overall trend is exactly the same. Now, the next thing we wanted to look at is crime percentage year over year. And as you can see, this is actually a very involved formula. I think it's over here, the mutate. This is actually working with a few lag formula. This means R is looking at the previous value of some variable in this case, the previous year, for example. Now, we could develop a formula like this in Tableau as well. That's no problem. We can always create a calculated field. But for simple tasks like this one, like compare something with the value in the previous year, Tableau actually ships with these, and we call them the quick table calculations. So I can just right click on the variable that I want to create this calculation on and say, okay, please give me the year over year growth. And it's called year over year growth, but it could also be a year over year change. And again, please disregard the 2016 data, but if you just look at the data for 2013 and 14 and 15, you can see exactly the same trend, and even the numbers match almost exactly because, like I mentioned, we have the November and December data still kept in. It's not exactly the same. So that's interesting, and we can make the exact same observations as the author did. So that's very interesting. The next thing they did was actually split it up and look at the change, both the absolute change and also the percentage change of each of the different crime incident types. So let's do the same thing. So how can we do this? First of all, they also already suggested to make a trellis chart like this, so we can kind of do the same by first flipping the axes. And let me go back to the absolute numbers first, so we can clear the table calculation. These are the absolute numbers again. I'm going to remove the labels. And now we can just look at them by offense category ID, right? So I'm just going to put this one in here, put this one on rows. And now we can see for each of the crime types, we can see exactly the trend that they are looking at. Now they only look at the years 2012 to 14, but I decided to keep everything in here because I don't really see the point of excluding data that is perfectly valid. Well, having everything in orange is not really that nice, so let's just remove this one from color and maybe put the number of records also on here so we have a better idea of what's going on. Let me move the legend over here so we can already see that there is this category all other crimes, and there was another one, other crimes against persons, which are kind of generic, so the author removed them. Let's do the same, just because we don't really know what they are, and they're kind of skewing our analysis. But we can see that there's a few categories that are going up and a few other ones that are going down. And the interesting thing here is that the author made some very interesting observations based on what are the growth categories, which is growth sounds good, but in this case it's kind of bad. So it means there's more of those crimes, which are larrency, drug, alcohol, and public disorder, and the declining ones, which is actually those that have less incidents in the over time. But this identification, I think, or at least there's no code being shown for it, but this identification of the growth and declining categories has actually been done visually. So they were looking into, okay, which are the ones that had the biggest decrease or increase. Now, what I want to show here is something that's a bit more involved, but it's actually still pretty easy. So I think you will be able to follow me with this one. Let me just make Tableau bigger for this one so we can see a bit more of the data. So what I actually want to do is I want to sort these now by which are the ones that have been growing the most between the first year of reporting and the last year of reporting, between 2011 and 2016. And the way I can do this is I can basically look at what is the very first value for each of the offense categories. And I can do this by using lookup, and then I'm interested in the sum of number of records. So I can just drag this in here. I could also have typed this one, and I'm interested in the very first one. All right. So this is the first value. So let's have a look. For this one, it means the number of records in this year was 1,663, and the lookup value, the first one, was also 1,663. So that's okay. But we do have a problem down here because apparently it is using the same value of 1,663 for all of them. That's obviously not correct. So we need to tell Tableau to always restart their calculation at the offense category. And now it's correct. So now we can see this is actually 93, and the first value is also 93. And this one is 3,579, and the first value is also 3,579. So that's great. Now we can do the same thing, and I'm copying again with the control key. I can copy this one and edit and remove the first and make it the last. So this would actually make this one the last value. So I want to make sure that this value is now the same as all of these. And don't be fooled by those two looking almost the same. This is just because we have different axes on the bottom. But as we can see, the number of records was 2005, and the last one is also 2005, so that's correct. And since I copied the second pill from the first one, the scope of the table calculation was also correct. And now we can actually calculate the difference between those two. So that is the last value, which is this one down here, minus the first one for each category, right? And again, I could type all this, but I can also just drag and drop it because the purpose is we want to type less, okay? So here's our calculation. And now we can see overall we had a decrease of 659, but we can also see that there is still the same mistake that we had earlier. So we need to tell Tableau again how to calculate these and to restart at each offense category, right? So that's great. So now we can see for each of the offense categories, we have just one value. Now I don't need these two anymore. Those were just temporary values. And what I can do now is I can save this one over here. I can materialize it into my data set. So this would be, for example, my absolute change 2011 to 2016, right? And let's type it correctly. So it looks nice. Okay, so now I could save this one into my data set and actually reuse it in other analyses. What we can do next is to actually use this one for the sorting, right? So what I want to do next is to create a ranking. And there's a number of rankings in Tableau. So when I start typing, there's a number of ranking functions. So you can see in this case, we actually want to use the dense ranking, which means that I do have one value for each of the ranks. And I do want to do my ranking on the absolute change that I just created, right? And that's basically it. So let's have a look. Here's my ranking. And let's just put this one on labels so we can see what's going on. And we can see, okay, this one is ranked number 1, which had the most growth, which is actually bad in our case, but let's just keep it that way for now. So what I can do now is make this one a discrete number. So it's becoming a blue pill. Move this one here. I can actually, by the way, remove the absolute change over here. And now we can see I do have on the top the drug alcohol, which actually had the most, hence rank number 1, the most growth between 2011 and 2016 in absolute numbers. And that actually then helps me to find the information that the blog author also found, that the growth categories were actually, let's go up again, drug, alcohol, public disorder, and larynxy. And the top declining ones are theft from motor vehicle, burglary, and robbery, right? So exactly the same result, only that we did it in a data-driven way, not just a visual way, and yet it was very easy. We had minimal typing. I could drag and drop most of it. So that was actually, yeah, very cool, I think. Okay, the other thing that they do is actually something we had done earlier again. So I'm not spending too much time on this one because you already know how to do that, which was to show the year-over-year growth for each of the categories. So this again is very easy. We can just right-click this one, click table calculation, and select the year-over-year growth. And just like this, we have the overall year-over-year growth. We can, for example, see this massive growth here in 2013 for the drug and alcohol. And this is also something that the blog author elaborates about in their blog, like what's going on there. That's actually very interesting. One thing I might want to do is also then copy this one to color so we can actually see what's going on with the colors. Now, something that's bothering me is that this is growth, which is actually a negative thing, but it's shown in blue. So let's just reverse this color scheme so we can see, okay, growth is actually bad, right? And all that is very easy in Tableau. And well, I guess the author didn't spend too much time on making this one look nice, but as I just showed, it's actually not that much work to make things look nice in Tableau, and we have almost production-ready graphs. Now these are almost the same. This is just the absolute growth and the relative growth, so you already know how to do these. What I wanted to show now is how easy it is to perform these kind of visual analytics that the author did in a lot of code, which I don't know how long it took to type it, but it probably took longer than it took me to drag and drop all the things that I just showed you. And thereby like I said, I don't want to disprove anybody of they're using the wrong tool. I just want to show how easy it is to do these things, and especially explorative data analysis, like in this case, how easy it is to do them in Tableau. And we could develop so many other things. So maybe a peek preview. One of the things that the author also did was kind of look into drug and alcohol related things. So what they did here, and let me show that, this was actually in the third part, what they did was to create this graph, for example, but what they actually showed was this incidence with Mariana classification. So just to finish off, let's just replicate this timeline maybe. So again, the first occurrence date is on the x-axis, so let's put this one here, and as the author said, this was on the monthly level, so let's do the same on a continuous month. And let's look at the number of records that happened. Okay, like this. Now this is the overall crime. So in this case, let's filter this one to, first of all, the offense category ID of drug related, drug and alcohol related. And then we can also use the offense type ID. I'm going to put this one in color and drag the legend over here because now you can see there's a lot of different offense IDs here, but we only want to look at the ones that are related to marijuana. So let's exclude everything else. And this is kind of the same graph that we see on the other side. Now, one thing that I found very interesting and I didn't know yet is that apparently April 20th has a specific meaning in the circles of people using marijuana. And the author says that this can be seen in the graph. Now, it can be seen that there is a lot of marijuana possession incidents in Aprils, right? This October. So we can see this one. But I would actually like to disagree with the author on the notation of the April the 20th, because in Tableau we can just very easily drill down with a click and we can still see the spike. But this is actually not April 20th, it's April 19th. But then again, since this is the drug marijuana possession incidents, maybe it's because people were carrying around the stuff they were going to use on the next day or a few days afterwards for this apparently celebration of marijuana use. So the other thing that I found very interesting, or that the author also mentioned was very interesting, marijuana usage has been legalized in the state of Colorado in the year 2013, and yet from the year 2013, the number of marijuana-related incidents actually went up. So we can see here the gray curve, which is the possession. This is actually where the incidents went up. So that's a very curious thing. So even though it's legalized now, the number of incidents went up. But anyways, I don't really want to go too deep into what's going on in the data. I wanted to focus mainly on the analyses and the types of analysis that have been done here and how easy it is to replicate these in Tableau. I hope you found this very interesting. And once again, this series is not meant to discredit the authors of the original data analysis. It's just to show how easy it is to use Tableau to do these kind of analyses and what else can be done in Tableau, which kind of sometimes even makes the ideas that the original authors had or the original researchers had even easier, or how we can go even one step further with the use of Tableau in those analyses. So once again, I hope you liked it. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comment section, and I hope to see you again in the next edition of Let Me Tableau This for You.